So in human design, environment, also known as your orientation variable, is essentially the kind of place or environment in which you will feel most supported and are most likely to thrive. In particular, where you're going to be most supportive, most likely to thrive, and experience the least resistance as you live as your true, authentic, undistorted, unconditioned self. And the interesting thing about environment type is it's not usually a surprise to most of us. Like, we're usually drawn to these kinds of places even without knowing what our environment type is on paper, or places with these qualities, or even living in a certain way, because your environment type is also like an archetype. It says something about you as a person. So these aren't usually like a total surprise to us. It's more like, that's why I've always felt best when I'm in a city or away from a city or sitting in this part of the room versus that part of the room, or why I like my bed being over there or why I associate with certain kinds of people. It's things like that. And also, another good thing to know about environment is that these are kinds of places, not literal or specific locations. So, when we're talking about environment, we're talking about the qualities of the places you're in, both physical and metaphorical, or I should say, both literal and metaphorical. So, even for the environment types that are more literal, for example, passive mountains, there are many mountains and mountain ranges in the world. It's not talking about like one specific location, even though people with passive mountains environment type are supposed to be on like literal mountains. There's so many mountain ranges to choose from. So only you and your body know the specific places. Your environment can't tell you like where in the world that is or where you should move. Only that the best places for you are going to have these certain qualities to them. Also, and I basically just hinted at this, but these aren't just physical attributes of the environment, they're also metaphorical or energetic attributes. So, for example, someone with Valley's environment may do, a lot better and probably would do a lot better, like in a ground level apartment or sitting, on the floor rather than on a higher bar stool. But they'll also feel most at home in a place where they feel like they can get down into things and get down with the people rather than a place that feels like elevated or more exclusive or like you are removed from things. And this also means that, if you can't move or you have to be in a certain place right now, there are ways of rearranging the space or decorating it or even locating yourself within it and relating to that space that can make it more suitable for you. So if you're a shores person, for example, but you're landlocked, there are ways that you can still make that work for you. You're not like necessarily doomed. Another thing to know about your environment type is that it does tell you about you, yourself as a person. It's kind of like how each cognition type has a certain like gift or skill that comes along with just being sensitive in the way that they are. Your environment type also comes with some gifts, or at the very least, certain qualities in a certain way that is most natural for you to approach life. The last thing to know about environment before we dive in a little bit more to the specifics is that it really becomes more impactful and honestly more important to living your design correctly once you hit about age 30. So it correlates with your Saturn return, which means it's about 27 to 31 years of age where this becomes more impactful. That doesn't mean that your environment doesn't matter before that, or you won't notice that some environments feel, more supportive to you than others and that it aligns with your environment type. It also doesn't mean that you wouldn't show up with the qualities of being a shores person or being a valleys person before that. What it means is that when it comes to living as your true self, you'll probably notice that there is a bigger difference between how easy it feels to do that in your correct environment type than it would in one that's not as supportive, or even the opposite. And again, this is one of those places, he did this a lot, where the founder of human design was like, your life will start to fall apart if you don't do this correctly. He was like, if you're not in the right environment, you'll die, but like, I don't agree with that. He just used examples from his own life, where he was a shores person. And when he moved away from the shore, he said that his life fell apart, when he was like living in the desert. And then as soon as he moved to an island, his life, got a lot better and he was able to live as his true self. But really take all of that with a grain of salt. I don't know that I would say that it's that dire. In fact, I wouldn't say it is. Environment is important, but living completely in alignment with this, like, it's up to you to decide where you feel best anyway. So use this information as you will. Then again, I'm not 30 yet. I have been through my Saturn return, but yeah, turned 30 on Saturday, the Saturday that I'm recording this from. So I guess we'll see. So first off, how do you find your environment type? So your environment type is taken from the quote unquote arrow on the bottom left of your chart. So it's right beneath what we would call your determination variable. And on more advanced charts, like if you go to genetic matrix or you even look at my chart, which for some reason has the numbers flipped, which is weird, but you'll see that there are numbers there, and that would tell you your environment type. But we don't really need to go into that because basically every chart that shows you your environment will just tell you in the information hub. So if you're using my chart generator, it'll say what your environment type is. For example, I am active mountains. So interestingly, there are actually two versions of each environment, so they can be experienced differently, even if you have the same overarching environment. I don't necessarily say there are 12 environments, not six, but the difference here is that one of them is going to be what we call observed, and the other is going to be observer. And I'm going to call these active for observed and passive for observer because it can be a little confusing for some of these if you use the traditional term. I will tell you what they are, but then I'll, say this is the active version or this is the passive version. So when you have an active version of an environment, which means that your environment variable, so the bottom left one is facing left, that means that you know that you're in the correct environment for yourself when you want to get more involved with things, or it feels very natural and easy for you to go out and get involved with stuff. You are more like the actor on the stage, and that's why this is called the observed version of the environment. And you also know that you're in the right place when it feels like you're a little bit more energized, like you just want to do more. So, for example, as someone with active mountains, and that literally is what it's called, it's active and passive mountains. As someone with active mountains, I know that I'm in the right place when I honestly do want to like write a lot and record a lot and just get involved in the conversations that are happening there. And on the other hand, for an active version of an environment, you'll know that you are not in the right place when you feel like sluggish and like tired and like, ugh, I can't even like motivate myself to get involved. Now, on the other hand, if you have your environment variable facing right, this is observer. And this is what I would call a passive environment type. So for these people, it's really about going to a place where you feel like you don't have to get involved so much. You can kind of just like sit back and watch the show and allow these things to flow in and out of your environment, whether it's people, opportunities, like whatever, just kind of flow in and out. And you just kind of sit back a little bit and watch. And so in this, metaphor of the stage and the theater, like you'd be kind of the person in the audience. Like you're still there, you're still a part of it, but you don't have to like go on stage to get what you need out of this environment. That's not why you're there. Now, when we're speaking about this more practically, like you'll know the right environment for you as well when it's one that makes you feel calmer, like you can just kind of sit back. You don't have to get so involved, you don't feel so pressed to. And it doesn't make you feel like anxious or on edge or like jittery. Now, if we go over your environment type and you're like, that's funny, I feel like I go to exactly the opposite kind of place, or I find myself in exactly the opposite kind of place a lot of the time, this is probably due to something called transference. And to understand transference, really quickly, you just have to understand this thing. I know it's going to sound complicated, but it's not. Each of the environment types is related to a number, which is related to the 6 profile lines of the hexagram. So for example, the caves environment is related to the 1 line, also known as the investigator. And each of the lines of the hexagram has like a partner, which is called its harmonic line. So the 1 line's partner is the 4 line, the 2 lines partner is the 5 line, and the 3 lines partner is the 6 line. What that means is that like they have something kind of in common, and yet they're also like on opposite sides of the spectrum from each other. And the same goes for environment types. So each of the environment types again has a number. And then when you are basically living in a super conditioned way, when you are living very out of alignment, I think your energy field's like really distorted, you will transfer to the opposite one because it's the harmonic line. That's kind of like this spectrum. So for example, again, I'm a mountains type. I'm a mountains environment type. But when I'm in transference, I will act like a caves person, which is not right for me. And also an indication for me, I'm like, something is off. So all of this is just to say, in simpler terms, when you're just really living out of alignment or something's really off, you might find that you are actually living in exactly the opposite way when it comes to environment or the qualities of your environment type kind of person. Another really interesting thing about your environment variable is that there is this sense or this super sense, this way that you are really attuned to things, and also this kind of like skill set or gift that comes online when you are in the correct environment. And this is called your environment sense. So if this sounds familiar, if it sounds like your cognition, which is your like actual super sense, which comes online when you eat correctly for yourself, it is similar. It's just activated by a different thing, which is being in the right place for yourself. So if you haven't seen my cognition video or the six cognitions, then I highly recommend you do because all of the senses, all the environment senses are the same as the cognitions. It's just this is being activated by being in the correct place. That's being activated by you consuming things correctly. And I think this is really cool too because it explains why you may feel like you have a certain cognition that you don't actually. So for me, I have a touch cognition and I do really relate to that. But when I'm in the correct place for myself, I can see things coming together externally because my environment sense is outer vision. And then lastly, a disclaimer, which I am also going to put for each timestamp because I know you. I know you go right to your timestamp, but the reason I know that is because I am you. I do exactly the same thing. But I want you to see this either way or hear this is that at the end of the day, human design is about learning how your body speaks to you so that you can get back to trusting it and living as your true authentic self, which means that no matter what the rest of this like higher level variable stuff tells you, the most important thing for you to do is follow what feels right to you. So if you are in a place that on paper is supposed to align with your environment type, but you don't feel good there, that's an indication that it's not the actual location that's right for you, even if it has all those qualities. So this is to say, like, please first and foremost, follow what feels right to you and understand too that, when you follow your strategy and authority, it's very, very likely you will end up in an environment that has the qualities of your environment type because that's just what will naturally feel right to you. Use your environment type, like any other part of your chart, as validation for what has felt correct for you, right? So if you're a mountains person, you've always felt drawn to elevated spaces and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Please just use that as validation. Don't use that as like, oh no, my house, which I love living in, isn't the correct mountains environment, and then force yourself to move somewhere else or do something you don't want to do with your home. Like, that's not the point here. You will be drawn to the correct spaces anyway when you follow your strategy and authority, when you follow what feels right to you, follow your intuition, and listen to your body. All right, so let's get started with the first environment type, caves. Now, please remember, and I'm saying this for each timestamp, these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. And also, not all caves environments are going to be correct for you automatically. It's just that of different kinds of places, it's going to be places with caves qualities that will be most supportive for you. So it's really important that you use your strategy in authority or in non-human design speak. You trust your feelings, your body, your intuition on whether a space is right for you or not. If it feels off and you are not happy there, don't force yourself to be there, stay there, or move there. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the right caves locations anyways. So following what feels right to you is the most important thing. But anyway, so if you have caves environment, you are someone who will probably do very well in contained spaces. So this is spaces where it doesn't feel like too big or open or expansive. Now that's a pretty general description, right? And like most environment type descriptions are. And that means that this is going to be different things for different caves people because one caves person could feel perfectly comfortable in a space and another might feel like agoraphobic while inside somehow, right? While the other person's like, oh, this is like perfect for me. So it really is about how held and safe you feel in this space. And the name of the game for you really is that feeling of safety. Cave's environment is connected to the first color, which is connected to the first line of the hexagram. And the first line is all about getting to the foundation of something, feeling safe, feeling like you understand it, resolving fear by understanding a lot about something, or like knowing everything about it or the space. So it's about the absolute basics. And what is the absolute basic thing for humans and like pretty much any living thing? It's feeling safe enough to live and do other stuff. So it's no surprise that we find this energy in caves people overall, especially when it comes to determining the correct environment for themselves. Now, of course, safety is important for most people. That sense of safety is the basis for being able to do anything in life. But that's just going to be something that's particularly important for someone with caves environment. So the best places for you are places that you can kind of feel like are a retreat or a hideaway or like your nook. So it's not necessarily about you isolating because other people can be there with you, especially if you have blending caves, which is the passive version of this environment. But I will tell you that caves people are built to be pretty discerning and pretty picky about any of the people who can be in their cave with them, especially if it's their home that we're talking about. I have a friend who has caves environment. I can't remember if it's selecting or blending. I wouldn't be. It's no, it's actually blending. Interesting. But she was going to be doing a retreat with somebody else. They were talking about doing a retreat, and the other person was like, "Oh, well, we can just like do it in one of our houses. Like, why don't we just have it at your house?" And my caves friend was like, excuse me, like with people I don't know, I'm just supposed to like let them into my house, like that's weird. And it's not to say again that every caves person is like that, of course, but you do tend to see that they're less often the people who like have a party at their house, or at least if they do have a party there or host a party, it's like they know everyone who's coming. They're selective about that. Caves people are also, in general, very comfort and security driven much of the time. So it's not to say that they wouldn't enjoy new experiences. There are definitely other parts of a human design chart that could indicate that, but they don't like to be like surprised or shocked or caught off guard. So a caves person may look maddeningly concerned with like safety or the basics to other people, but that's okay. Like caves people are here to kind of keep it simple, and also they have a gift for keeping things simple. Like they have a gift of seeing things very directly, and not making it more complicated than it has to be, which can be so helpful when other people are making things way more complicated than they have to be to accomplish a goal. Now, when it comes to the actual physical attributes of a space, caves people tend to do really well on the bottom floor or even below ground. They may do very well in basement dwellings or like have a basement office. If most of the rooms in your house are big, but there's like one room that's smaller, the caves person will probably be in that room either for work or living or just like a little hideaway, like their pad. This could even be a reading nook that they really enjoy. So a space carved out within an existent space. When they want to get away, they probably will like go hide in their little spot. And this also may be obvious too, but open concept living may not be the best for these people, or open concept like offices are also probably not the best for them. So if you have like an enormous room in your house and it stresses you out or makes you very uncomfortable, you're just like, I'm just like feeling off, using any kind of partition can help. Or you can like straight up build a wall and make two smaller rooms if you want, but not everybody is able to do that. And you also don't have to. You can make a fake wall between these two things. Another thing that you see with caves people is that since, again, safety and feeling secure and grounded and where you are is so important, caves people usually really thrive in spaces that don't have a lot of doors or windows or access points. Or if they do have windows, they're not like these giant picture windows that can be very unsettling for them. It's just like too much space or too much of an opportunity for them to be seen. Because one, they don't usually like to be watched. And two, they also like to feel like they have control of the room, and then also control of like how things are flowing in and out, or at least like an idea of how that's happening. Like they see it. So, they would like to usually be seated where they can see all access points of the room, kind of like a gangster having, the typical mobster thing. I always have the booth at the back of the restaurant, my back to the wall, and that's because that way they can see everything that's coming in and out and they're not surprised by that. Even if it's like subconscious, they don't realize they're doing that. Again, a caves person doesn't like to be snuck up on. So having someone pop up behind them is going to be quite jarring. So when it comes to being in like a restaurant, for example, again, they maybe, want the booth against the wall, or a kid may enjoy having their, bed pushed up against a wall so they don't feel exposed on all sides. Or, they may put like a pillow or a stuffed animal behind their back so that feels covered. A student in a lecture hall may like the back row. Now, if you have selective caves, which is the active version of this environment, you are probably going to be a little bit more strict with all of this stuff. So you may be someone who doesn't even want any windows in your office or your bedroom or your bathroom, or you may not want to host at your house like at all. Like you may be exceptionally picky about who and what enters your abode, and that's all very normal. If you have blending caves, which is the passive version of this environment, you will likely be a little bit looser with all of this stuff. So people with blending caves maybe a little bit more lax about who or what comes in or out. You may be more okay with a slightly more open space, etc. Because remember, too, when it comes to observed environment types, it's more about like things coming to you. It's more about being receptive. So, in a way, a blending caves person would have to be a little bit more open about that stuff for things to work. And luckily, you naturally are. But you will still very much benefit from having a place that does feel like this container for you, this really safe space, this hideaway, this place where you feel held. Now, the second environment is markets environment. And before we dive in, I'm going to say this for each timestamp, but please remember these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. Also, not all markets environment are, made equally, as meaning that not all of them are going to be correct for you automatically just because they are a markets environment. It's just of different kinds of places. It's going to be places with markets qualities that are going to be the most supportive for you. So it's really important that you use your strategy and authority, or in non-human design speak, you trust your feelings, intuition, and body on whether a space is correct for you. If it feels off and you aren't happy there, please don't force yourself to be there, stay there, or move there. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the right markets locations for you anyway. So following what feels right to you is truly the most important thing. But anyway, so if you have markets environment, you are someone who will tend to thrive in a place where you have a lot of options, choices, things and places to try out, and most importantly, things that will fit your quite specific tastes, desires, and needs. Markets people also tend to do really well in places where things are being quote unquote traded or exchanged. So that can be an exchange of goods for money. So literally a marketplace, like maybe you live near a grocery store or even above a grocery store or a market or like a shop. Or it can be a place where, like any place where people swap ideas, information, things like that, one thing for another. And it's for this reason that markets people tend to do pretty well in cities or at least greater metropolitan areas. It's because of the availability of all those different options. But even if you don't live in a city, which is totally fine, you don't have to, a place where you feel like you have access to a lot of options, to your choices, to your things that you really like, is going to be pretty important for you to feel like you are getting what you need from where you live as a markets person. Of course, when it comes to actual items, we do have online shopping, so that cuts through some stuff. But there are other things like experiences, communities, that you can only get from living in a certain place. So with markets people as well, they also want their environment to be up to the exact vision or feeling or standard that they're going for, or else they probably won't be happy. It'll be like, yeah, it's good. Like I'm grateful for it, but it's like, this just isn't it. Like, this isn't right. This isn't what I want. And a markets person may not even know what they want until they see it or they find it, but they definitely know when it's not the thing that they want. And this is very similar to taste determination or the strongest sense of taste. So taste cognition, where they just know without having to try it. They're like, nope, it's not that. And I know because I know. And stop asking me to tell you why I know. I just do. Stop pushing me to settle for this thing I don't want to settle for. And until the thing is it, they're probably not going to feel as settled in their environment. So this could be the actual place that they don't like, or the way that it's designed, or the way that it's decorated, whatever. But they're going to be seeking something else to fit exactly what they want. Like markets people are seekers to find the perfect version of what it is they're looking for. And by the way, if you know anything about cognition or what you would call strongest sense in human design, you might say, yeah, this really does sound like taste cognition or even taste determination. In fact, it sounds exactly like that. And it's because markets is actually connected to the two of them. Markets environment is connected to the second hexagram line, and these people tend to have very specific, very unwavering tastes. That's a very common theme with the two line. It's very normal for them. Another thing to know about the two line is that it is incredibly connected to what is organic and natural. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean, like organic foods or materials, although that may be something you're interested in and not willing to settle on as a markets person. What I really mean here is that it's connected to the natural flow of things, like the cycle of life. And in particular, it's pretty connected to the seasons and the change of seasons. And so when we're talking about environment here, that means that for markets people, they tend to like to change things up in their environment in alignment with seasons, whether those be the literal seasons, so winter, spring, summer, fall, or their personal seasons, like through how their life is lived. So they may be people who have like a summer decor set and then a winter decor set. Or maybe they're just like really into decorating for the holidays. Or it could just be like, the way this room is decorated, where things are in this room, it's just super stale. It's not me anymore. It's not the thing. I'm not in that season of my life anymore. We need to do something new and fresh. So you just rearrange things. Now, when it comes to the home specifically, or a room in your home, or the building that you're working and living in, so like an actual dwelling, building, a structure, one thing to keep in mind is that clutter can be particularly jarring for someone with markets environment, especially if you're just like a neat freak already. So if you're feeling off, I recommend doing some organizing or maybe even throwing away some stuff you don't need anymore. Also, a note, because the marketplace is, again, a lot about trade or doing work in exchange for something, it's very common to see markets people have a connection between their home, their dwelling, and their work. And we'll dive into that in the active and passive forms for this environment right now. Now, if you have internal markets, pretty much the same thing as every other thing I've said about markets place, but it's usually more about having the options come to you in one way or another. And it's also usually that the market is quote unquote inside internal. So that may be that, you just have more of a preference for online shopping where you don't leave your house and it gets delivered to you, but you still have all those options to choose from on your computer. Or, you're on Facebook Marketplace and then you find it there and you're like, oh, great. And then you go pick the thing up, but you're accessing all the options like from your home. That's one way. Or if you do happen to be one of those markets people who have that sort of live work situation, unlike someone who lives where they work, so again like the apartment above the shop or something like that, then it's more like you would work from where you live. So for example, my friend is a hypnotherapist and she does her work from home. Her office that she works from is in her house. That's where she records her podcast, as opposed to like, living in the same building where her hypnotherapy practice is located. You see that difference there. Another example, which I think is so, so funny, is my other friend who has internal markets has really wanted to do this thing where she has like a pop-up coffee shop for her friends in her home. So they like come and they just enjoy a little cafe in her house, and people can like kind of bring pastries to share, or like once a week, we like rotate who brings the pastries and then she makes the drinks to order. So it's again, they're them coming to her and it's in this enclosed space and it's literally her offering goods from out of her home. And she's like created this little market where there could be this little trade. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm like, oh my God, that's so applicable. If you have external markets, you are someone who is going to be more traditionally what we'd associate with markets environment, which is like you go out and find and get the thing you want, like you seek it. You go to the market, whatever that is, whether it's a mall, a new part of town, a literal farmer's market, whatever. You'll probably get a lot out of being able to go out into and feel like there's so much opportunity and there are so many options to choose from out there. And if these people do quote unquote work from home, it's more likely that they will have their home where their work is. So you would live where you work, not the other way around. And here's an example of that. Like traditionally, in human design, they give this example where it's like this would be the person who lives above the shop that they work at or that they own, or they live very close to it. Of course, not every external markets person will live where they work, but if they do, this is, more likely the setup. It's that it's not like they're working out of their home, like the home is the main thing, and then it's like they have an office there. It's like they have the office and they live in the office, like, or they live above the office or something like that, or they live in a live workspace. And another example, which actually doesn't have to do with like living where you work, because again, that's not going to be every markets place person. I remember I was in Salem, Massachusetts a few years ago. It was actually in October, and they were having this psychic fair where all the tables were set up in this bigger part of the mall and then also outside and in different shops. It's like all of downtown Salem was this giant marketplace of psychics. And I was like, this is probably so great for any of the psychic readers or tarot readers or energy workers that are participating who had external markets. Like they were probably totally thriving there. And I mean, forget the psychics, forget the people working there. Imagine the people who were in external markets just wandering through Salem that day. They're like, oh my God, so many options. I can find exactly the person I want to get a tarot reading from. The third environment is kitchen's environment. And before we dive in, and I'm saying this for each timestamp, please remember these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. Also, not all kitchen's environments are created equal. So I mean that not each of them is going to be correct for you simply because it is a kitchen's environment or could qualify as one. It's just that of different kinds of places, it's going to be places with kitchen's qualities that are the most supportive for you. So it's really, really important that you use your strategy and authority, or in non-human design speak, that you trust your feelings, body, and intuition on whether a space is right for you. If it feels off and you aren't happy there, please don't force yourself to be there, stay there, or move there. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the right kitchens locations anyway, so follow what feels right to you. That is the most important thing. So if you have kitchens environment, you are someone who is probably going to do best in a place where things are being created or quote unquote cooked up. So kitchens are places where things are made or ingredients are being pulled together and blended to make something new. So that means that there are obviously a lot of different kinds of places where you could be in a kitchen's environment, because there are lots of different places that could fit this description. So coffee shops, co-working spaces, laboratories, boardrooms, the main floor of a startup company, common areas of your apartment building, the streets of a city, a bar, a newsroom. Like, that's such a kitchen's environment. Oh my God, watch All the King's Men. And is that what it's called? The one with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. But yeah, when I think of a kitchen's environment, it's like so newsroom. And also like literal kitchens. I was also gonna say like an illicit drug lab. That's a laboratory. Technically, it's a kitchen. I don't encourage you to be in one of those. But basically, all of these spaces have something in common. It's that that's where things are happening. That's where people are doing stuff. People are getting involved, coming up with stuff. Things are bubbling up. It's not really ever about like isolating or getting away from it all, because people with kitchens environment really see things more clearly and understand things more and just get more out of life when they are in things and they are involved, when they're like up close in it. And this makes a lot of sense too when you consider that kitchen's environment is connected to the third line of the hexagram, the martyr, which is all about experimenting, seeing what works and what doesn't work, getting very involved in life, maybe being like the first person to do something, pulling things together in a new or different like combination, seeing how they interact, things like that. Like it's so three-lined, the kitchen's environment. Now, because of all this, open concept living or work architecture in a space can be great for these people, because then they have access to, or at least proximity to, all the things that are happening. They get to feel like everything is one big hub and they're always in it. They have their people and their community there, and they also have easy access to them, basically. That being said, please note that if you have kitchens environment, this doesn't mean that you yourself have to be interacting with all the people there or all the hubbub. So, you could be introverted and have kitchens environment. Like, I know somebody who is like that. But that actual interaction with other people, that's not the point. The point is that you're spending time in a place or even living in a place where these things are happening. So you could go to a coffee shop and never interact with anyone but the barista or anyone at all. You can usually, most Starbucks, you can just go there and like sit there. No one's going to tell you to leave. And you can still get that goodness out of the kitchen's environment. Also, since three lines love new things, kitchen's environment people tend to love finding and trying new places. That's really invigorating for them. They may not stay in those places, because the theme of the three line is bonds made and broken, which means you get out and you have a good time and you leave. But they usually like the experience of trying it, especially if it's a trendy or up and coming place. So, it's not just new to them or out of their usual routine. It's like new to everyone. It's just a new thing. And I have to say too that I think it's so funny, because I know quite a few kitchens people. And as a mountains person, I have to say, we are so different in how we deal with life and how we work and how we relax, etc. Because I had a roommate back in the day, and when I needed to recharge and feel good, I would whisk myself off to my room on our second story apartment, or I'd hang out on the balcony. And when she needed to do that, she would go to an event or like a bar or a party. And I was like, what? Like, you told me you weren't feeling good. You told me you were feeling like so sad. How are you doing this? Because we got that comfort and that support in such different kinds of environments and in such different ways. For me, going to a bar would have been so draining. I was like, I don't need to be amongst the people right now. I need to whisk myself away to my mountaintop. But for her, not being able to do that was really, really draining for her. If she didn't have access to, her people, communities, different spots that were away from home, she would have really struggled, just like I really struggle when I have to be too in it. The other thing I'm literally just realizing now is that she actually worked in a lab, which is so interesting. She was a lab manager. And think that this is also a really great reminder of how not every kitchen's environment is right for every kitchen's person because she didn't enjoy it. It wasn't the right community for her. Not enough stuff and like new stuff was really happening there. It was like the same old, same old. And then she found a job in sales instead where there is a lot of stuff happening. She actually gets to travel a lot, and that was so much more of a right fit for her. Now, let's say that you live alone or you don't want to go outside a lot in a certain season. Let's say you're living in Chicago and you're like, oof, that January wind is really brutal. Let's just say, you're going to be spending more time inside or just away from people. I will say that that's not a super common experience for a kitchens person to want to do that. But if so, that's okay, at least in the short term, because you can still change how you interact with the space that you're in. You can still decorate or arrange your home in ways that are more supportive to you as a kitchens person. So, you can spend more time in the literal kitchen or the hub of your home, or you can work on creating and spiffing up what you already treat as the center of your home. I know that people will say, like, well, that's my house isn't built like that. It doesn't have a spot right in the middle. I don't have a grooving center right in the middle of my house. That's okay. Again, it doesn't have to be literal. Another thing about kitchens people is that, it being connected to the three line, which likes new things, you can, display whatever new stuff you're into right now, or like have lots of activities available and in view, like games and coloring books or books in general, or things that will, get conversations started. Or when people are at your house, be like, oh, you want to do this? Like we can get involved in this today. Also, being the hub. So having people come over can be great for kitchens people if you can't go out. So anything that you can do to set up some kind of center space or some kind of hub where people can come chill, work, etc., would be great. I would just say make it as easy as possible to hang out in that spot together or gather around something, whether that means organizing your home differently or even, like I said, just making, that center space more inviting to yourself and others. Now, if you have wet kitchens, which is the active form of this environment, you will probably do better in kitchens environments that are humid. So that could be like you live in a humid place in the world, or you just have a humidifier in your house and prevent it from getting too dry in there. And they do say that these people, traditionally, they say this, that they do well in like wet, leafy locations. So jungles and rainforests or, cloud forests, that kind of thing. But this is one where the description is so literal. I'm not really sure I believe that it applies as well as the other environment descriptions do, at least not in extremes. However, it still can apply, maybe just not in the way you'd think. So here's an example. I know someone who has wet kitchens environment, and she lived in the jungles of South America for a few months. And she told me, like, Ariana, I hated it. It was so hot, so humid. It was not for me. And I remember at the time being like, that is so weird. That's like exactly what you're supposed to thrive in as a wet kitchens person. But then I realized a few things, which was one, she was pretty isolated where she was. She wasn't close to community and definitely not a community she was really excited about. And that's a really big thing for kitchens people. So she probably wasn't able to get involved in her environment in the way that she needed to. And two, it's funny because she now lives in San Francisco, and out of all places in the Bay Area, the city is going to be the most humid because it's the closest to the water. It's the most moist, I guess you could say. And, I grew up in the East Bay area, and that's only 40 minutes inland. And I can tell you that is a lot drier there, like a lot drier. Also, San Francisco can be a very kitchens location, just like any city, because it has a lot of opportunities to be in the mix with other people and with life in general. I do know someone, on the other hand, who has wet kitchens who dreamed of moving to Sri Lanka, and she lives there now and she freaking loves it. Of course, she also lives in a city too, so there's stuff happening, but she does love the actual weather. Also, again, remember that this is an active form of this environment. So you'll notice that you will probably be a lot more productive or interested in activities or getting involved when you're in a kitchens environment. So the same person who told me, like, I was in the jungle, I really didn't like it. She told me another story where she had been trying to get this like project done for 3 weeks. She tried to sit down at her computer in her apartment. She just couldn't get it done. And then she went to a coffee shop and she got it done in like 30 minutes, which is just, it's very wet kitchens. Now, on the other hand, if you have dry kitchens, you will likely do well in a kitchen's environment that is literally a drier place where it doesn't see too much rainfall, where the humidity or moisture level is low. But just like wet kitchens, not every place that has this specific quality is going to be correct for you as a dry kitchen's location. And if it doesn't have the other qualities of a kitchen environment, like access to other people, collaboration, new things, new places, things happening and, coming together, it's probably not going to be as supportive and comfortable for you. So, yes, maybe you live in Arizona, but do you live like way out in the boonies? Do you live far away from any city or any community that feels correct for you? Or do you have access to a communal space or interesting nightlife or day life or events? That stuff is going to affect how correct this place feels for you. Also, there is such a thing as like too dry for anyone. So it's not that you need the driest place on earth. It's that you will probably do a lot better in a place that's drier than a place that's more humid. The other thing to remember is that since this is a passive form of this environment, when you're in the correct place for yourself, you may not feel the need to act or literally get so involved in what's going on. So you may be one of those people who goes to, trivia with your friends at a bar, but you don't actually want to play trivia. You just want to be there. Like, you're like, oh, this is so nice. Should we do this again next week at another place? And I don't try to answer any of the questions. We just hang out. The fourth environment is mountains environment. And before we dive into this, I'm saying this for each timestamp, please remember these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. Also, not every mountains environment place is created equally. So that means that not every mountains environment location is going to be correct for you. It's just that of different kinds of places, it's going to be places with mountains qualities that will be the most supportive for you. So it's really, really crucial that you use your strategy and authority, or in non-human design speak, trust your feelings, intuition, and body on whether a space is right for you. If it feels off and you aren't happy there, don't force yourself to be there, stay there, or move there. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the right mountains location anyway. So please just follow what feels right to you. That is the most important thing. Now, if you have mountains environment, the key word here for you is elevation or elevated, because unsurprisingly, mountains people do well in environments that are higher up. Now, literally speaking, that is the mountaintop. And we usually say that these people do better in places with less oxygen, which again makes sense because there is less oxygen the higher you go in elevation. But it's also, the higher floors of the building, the top bunk, the loft space, the bar stool rather than like low sitting furniture, the treehouse, the attic, the top of the staircase, the office or bedroom upstairs, living above the garage, the rooftop patio, etc. I actually even did a reading for someone with mountains environment who works with horses, and she said that her favorite place to post up is on top of the fence or the gate of the horse pen. I think that's what it's called, right? But anyway, she'd just sit up there and just watch everything. So mountains people also tend to like to have a nice view of things. It's kind of like how cats like to be high up on their little cat trees or, sitting on top of the dresser and watching you from there or whatever. It's very similar for mountains people. Mountains people also tend to really like their getaways. So they need time alone. It is very refreshing and supportive for them, mostly because they are people who understand things by getting more distance from them. So if you have mountains environment, you are completely the opposite of a kitchens person or a valleys person even, who sees things more clearly when they get into the thrum, when they throw themselves like into the fray almost. Mountains people like you, will do better when you can get out of the fray. So someone with mountains environment will not usually feel like they really get what's going on, or like they can see things, or like they can develop the correct perspective that makes sense to them until they pull away from things and view it from this higher, more removed place. As a result, like what does that mean practically? Mountains people can get pretty overwhelmed if they're like down in it with other people for too long, or just around other people for too long. After all, that's not really where they're supposed to be. That's not where they thrive. They need to be able to pull away and get this like bigger view of things. So they either need to feel like their home on the whole is that getaway, or they need a place on their home or their property where they feel like they can kind of escape to, or they frequently go on vacations. But it's basically like, where do you feel like you can whisk yourself away to, even for a short period of time? And if it's upstairs, that's even better, but that's not necessary. So that kind of thing is usually great for a mountains person. But again, when we're talking about environment, it's not just the literal or the physical, it's also the metaphorical and energetic, because apparently environment said pick a lane. Nah, couldn't be me. So when we're speaking more conceptually here, people with mountains environment just like any place, situation, or even community where they can exist higher up, so that where they can take a sort of elevated stance on things, or they can have an elevated view, or be kind of like set apart from other people in a way. So this is often luxury living situations or environments, like whatever feels like luxury to you. That's going to be different for every mountains person. I'd say that I actually have pretty like low standards for a mountains person when it comes to like luxury living. I don't need nice cars or like a super lush house or something like that. But it's living with higher standards, or knowing what your minimum is and not going below that. Mountains people don't really have to try at that, because that's our natural state. Like, it actually feels quite unnatural to force ourselves to live below our standards, or quote unquote lower ourselves. Although we often will, because we're conditioned to. But that's very draining to a mountains person to have to do that, just like it's draining for a kitchens person to have to be away from the action for too long. Now, when it comes to the archetype of the mountains person, like, what are these people like as people? This would be the archetype of someone who sits on the mountain and lets people come to them at the top of the mountain, those who are willing and able to meet them at that level, rather than the other way around, where the mountains person would descend off the mountain to meet people down where they are at currently. And the reason I say this is because mountains people can have these views on life where it looks kind of weird or detached or out of touch or almost too exclusive. Like, it doesn't apply to everyone, but it's not supposed to. That's like how mountains people are supposed to see things. It's only for the people who are willing to come and meet you at that level, whatever that happens to be. And this actually makes a lot of sense if you think about the fact that mountains environment is connected to the fourth line, also known as the opportunist. The fourth line is not here for everyone. It may want to be, because it's always looking for its people. It's always looking for the group that is like-minded, but it has a strong filter that keeps out those who are not. They are only here for the people who really, really match their vibe. They're here for people who really get things the way that they get them. At least for the most part, because the fourth line is supposed to build a foundation. It's supposed to fortify it and stick to it. And it cannot do that if it's constantly trying to, apply to every single person. Like, for the mountains person, your gift is seeing things differently from this higher up space. And so you can't really develop that, viewpoint and that gift if you're getting off the mountain and trying to pretend to see things the way everyone else is seeing them. Like, that's not even helpful. That's not where you're going to get your unique perspective that could change things. So you need to fortify that from where you are, rather than descending off the mountain, so to speak. So as a mountains person myself, I can tell you personally that we do not necessarily think we're better than you just because we have higher standards, or we don't want to quote unquote go beneath where we are. It just sometimes looks like that because we're like, I'm not coming down. I'm going to stay up here in this lofty level. And sometimes mountains people really like bougie, high quality stuff and experiences, or they just don't really like to deal with people who don't get it and aren't willing to come up for air on the mountain. Mountains people are just not here to lower themselves or their standards in that way, simply because people around them may think that they look snobbish or removed or aloof or detached or out of touch. And sometimes they do. And honestly, sometimes they are. So for example, Gwyneth Paltrow is a mountains person. She's not, the only example of how this can play out. For example, I think I'm a little bit more down to earth. And frankly, I don't really like Gwyneth Paltrow that much, but it's an example of how this energy can come off. And I know I'm kind of like waxing poetic about this because this is my environment type, but I know personally for myself, the way that this shows up is I really, really, really don't like going out to like bars and nightlife, etc., where there isn't some kind of like exclusivity on the kinds of people who are allowed in. Not because I'm like, keep the riffraff out, like I'm better than you. It's because I don't like feeling exposed to interacting with a ton of people who may be super weird or really drunk, or who I just like won't like and won't relate to. Like, I'm a 5 line profile, so I could, but I don't want to, Like, I've lowered my standards a lot through the years to not look like I thought I was better than everyone else. And I would like go like, yeah, we can go to this dive bar that's near your house, my friend, because you like this, where people aren't nice and the men are fucking creepy and they play music that I hate. But I don't do that anymore. I don't judge someone for doing that and liking that. I just have my preferences and I don't want to go to this place that doesn't meet those, you know? I don't even think they're that high anyway. And if me being up here upsets someone, it's not really my problem, just like it's not your problem as a mountains person either. Now, if you have active mountains, which, surprise, is the active version of this environment, mountains environment is actually the only one that uses active and passive. You don't have to necessarily like be on a literal geographical mountaintop. You are someone for whom this is going to be like a little bit more flexible and possibly more conceptual when we're talking about the qualities of the right places for you. So again, I have active mountains. I think I've said that like 5 times in this video. And I do love the mountains. I think they're great, but they don't like call to me, you know, like I just like taking the place that's higher up if I have the option. And I really relate to the energetic side of this the most, to be honest. And since this is an active version of this environment, again, you will probably tend to be more active and involved when you're in the right mountains environment for you. So even if you're alone, you'll probably be more inspired to work or work out more or whatever. Now, on the other hand, if you have passive mountains, you are the kind of person who would probably do best in a literal mountain or on a literal mountain, somewhere where the air has a lower oxygen percentage, etc. And that's pretty much all I have to say to you, besides the fact that because this is also a passive environment, the right locations for you, the right mountains locations will be ones where you feel like you can relax, sit back, and allow the people and things to find their way to you within this environment. The fifth environment is valleys environment. And before we dive into this, real quick, I'm saying this for each of the timestamps, but please remember these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. Also, not all valleys environments are created equal, which means not all are going to be correct for you just because they're valleys environments. It's just that of different kinds of places, it's going to be places with valleys qualities that are going to be most supportive to you. So it's really, really important that you use your strategy and authority, or in non-human design speak, that you trust your feelings, intuition, and body on whether a space is correct for you. If it feels off and you aren't happy there, please do not force yourself to be there, stay there, or move there. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the correct valleys location anyway, so following what feels right to you is truly the most important thing. So if you have valleys environment, the keywords here are connection and involvement. And we'll get into why that is and what that is in a minute, but first let's back up and talk about the physical qualities of a valleys environment. So someone like you would likely do best in a place that is pretty close to the ground, so maybe a literal valley, or the lower floors of, or the ground floor of a building. And the reason why I say close to the ground and not underground is because feeling connected and in tune with your environment and what's happening in your environment, not cut off or hidden from it, is a really important thing for a valleys person. You know, underground would probably be more for a caves person, if anyone. So, whatever the physical qualities of the space, it's really important for valleys people to feel like they are very tuned in to what's happening. And in particular, like they know what's going on. Like, are they in the know? They want to have access to information that's going around or that's being passed around. They don't like being left out, not because they necessarily take it personally, they might, but more because it means that then they're being cut off from whatever keeps them in flow. Because much like kitchen's environment or market's environment, valleys are supposed to be hubs. They're supposed to be places where things are happening or being passed along or exchanged, where trade might even happen. So when it comes to a space, that means that you as a valleys person will probably do a lot better in a place where you don't feel cut off from that. You need to feel like you have access to the people and the information, whether that's like an update on what's going on in your community, or, you know, being in the main part of an office building, or even gossip, or else you'll probably feel like you don't really see things clearly or understand things clearly. You're the opposite of a mountains person in that way. So someone like me who needs to pull away to see more clearly, you're more like a kitchens person where you need to be in it and involved. And this makes a lot of sense too when you realize that valley environment type is connected to the fifth line of the hexagram, also known as the heretic, which is all about communicating, getting involved, connecting with lots of different people, or lots of different kinds of people, innovative new ways of looking at things, universalizing. So, finding things or ways of doing things that apply to like basically everyone. Those are also the qualities that you'll find in a values person and what they will need from their environment. So places where they feel like that stuff is happening. If you don't feel like you can do that as a values person, you're probably going to feel cut off from your magic and feel like you're just not coming in contact with the right kinds of people and opportunities and viewpoints or whatever it is that you're looking for. The other thing to know about the fifth line is that it's also deeply connected to sound and acoustics. So, for example, the fifth determination type or taste digestion is sound. So either high or low sound. And it's the same for values people. The acoustics of a space, what you're hearing, what music or podcast you're listening to, the sound of someone else's voice, or whether or not you can hear what people are saying, to you, how loudly someone's mowing their lawn, all of that stuff is going to impact you as a values person. The sounds of your environment are going to be important, or the lack thereof. The lack of grating sounds is just as important as access to nice and pleasant sounds for a value person. Now, if you're in an environment that doesn't feel that supportive to you as a values person and you can't move or you can't really work somewhere else right now, that's all right. There are things that you can do within any space to promote this kind of energy. One thing that comes to mind is like having a bulletin board in your house or like a shared calendar so you know what's going on with everyone. You can work with headphones on to listen to the kind of music you like if you can't play it on speakers at work or at home, or you might get noise canceling headphones if you hate the sounds that are around you right now. If you can afford to, maybe you can soundproof your house. Not everybody can do that. That's kind of a drastic measure, but it's that kind of stuff. And when it comes to the values person as an archetype, these are the people who are really here to get down with the people. They're the ones who are supposed to ask, like, well, how does this affect everyone? Is this solution or this thing we're doing or this perspective applicable to all of us? Does it include everyone? Is it realistic and practical for everyone? Because the fifth line is here to universalize. It's not here to say, well, this perspective works for, 10% of people, but not everyone, and that's fine. They're here to say, this only works for 10% of people, so we need something more universal, or we need to fix the way that we're doing this thing. You could say that they're someone who looks more of the people. For instance, if a values person was a C-suite executive of a company or even the CEO, they wouldn't feel comfortable probably being like removed and out of the action and disconnected from what's happening with their employees just because they're in technically like a higher up part of the company. They wouldn't really like to like sit in their office and go, well, I'm the leader, so I stand apart. That's probably just not going to be how they would want to run things. That's really more of like a mountains person thing. That's how I would want to run things. A Valley CEO would want to like go be in the weekly meeting or maybe have, an all hands meeting every week so everyone's there. The point is that they would want to know what's going on in their company and they would probably stay really close to it, whether physically or not actually literally, like metaphorically. Now, if you have narrow valleys, which is the active form of this environment, yeah, you could go literal with this and say like it's cool for you to be in like a narrower space. But more important for these people is to feel like they're getting information head on and from like one source at a time, especially auditory information. So, for example, when communicating, these people tend to do better with like one-on-one conversations. Generally, they like to have like the person in front of them and then a way to block out other conversations. Maybe you're having a convo with someone and you're like, oh my God, it's too loud in here. Like, I can't concentrate on what you're saying. Like, let's step over here. Or let's even go to a different room. So too much sound on the periphery can be a little overwhelming and disorienting for them. So if I were to recommend noise canceling headphones for anyone, it would be narrow valleys people. Also, I would say that like if you're like ganging up on a Narrows Valley person is probably like their worst nightmare. So it's not that they don't want to hear what you have to say, but for example, if you're gonna do like intervention style approaches to people, or it's like we thought we would like all sit down as a group and like all address you, that would probably be really overwhelming for them. Now, if you have wide valleys, which is the passive form of this environment, it's the opposite of how narrow valleys people take in information and generally function. So you would be someone who would do better with having access to all this periphery stuff because it's not overwhelming really for a wide valleys person to be getting information from this side and that side and you're hearing things from over here and this snippet over there. If anything, it would probably be a little bit more like confronting and overwhelming for them to just like have this one-on-one conversation where it's like they block the rest of the stuff out and they're getting it just from that direction. And it's funny because I was years ago, I was doing a chart reading for someone's son. He was like 11 or 12. He wasn't there. I was just telling the mom about his chart, and he had Wide Valleys environment. And I told her these people like your son, are one, very attuned to sound, and they don't like to feel like they don't know what's going on or they're being left out of like a conversation or communication. And they will be very attuned to that stuff like in the periphery. So, not necessarily when someone's like directly talking to them, they like, pick up a lot from the periphery. And she was like, that's so funny because my husband and I, this happens all the time. We'll be having a conversation and my son will be just kind of like around and he'll think we're talking to him. And so he'll respond being like, I don't know, why do you ask? And we're like, I wasn't asking you. This is, you are not part of this conversation. You don't have to worry about this, right? Or he'd be like, what are you guys talking about? I don't understand. Like, why am I not in on this, you know? Because Wide Valleys people, they're quite tuned in that way. The sixth and final environment type is shores environment. And before we dive into this, I'm saying this for each timestamp, please remember these are concepts just as much as they are actual physical qualities to a space. Also, not all shores environments are created equally, which means not all shores environments places are going to be correct for you. It's just that of different kinds of places, it's going to be places with shores quality that are going to be most supportive for you. So what that means is it's really, really important that you use your strategy and authority, or in non-human design speak, you follow your feelings, intuition, and body on whether or not a space is correct for you. Your strategy and authority are going to lead you to the correct shores locations anyway, so follow what feels right to you. That is the most important thing. So if you have shores environment, the most supportive kinds of locations for you are first off going to be ones that basically lie on the border of two things, places, or environments. It's where two different environments or two different energies or things meet. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about what a shore actually is geographically. It's where the water and the land, two quite different environments or things, meet and come together. So obviously, that can apply to so many different kinds of places because there are quite a lot of places where two things come together, and you have this thing on this side or that thing on the other side or whatever. Now, literally, this means that you could live at the geographical shore. So you live at the seaside or at a lakefront property or along the banks of a river. Maybe you're hanging out in vacationing in one of the apartments facing a canal in Venice, for example. However, it does not necessarily have to be at the water. Unless you're natural shores, then it's much more likely that you'll want to be there anyway. But in general, it can be any border. It can be that you live, for example, on the edge of town. Or it could be that you live at the base of a mountain or close to the base of a mountain, where on one side you have the mountain, that slope, and the other side you have a flat area or city or civilization. It could be that, actually you live on top of a hill and there are two valley settlements on either side of you, which sounds like a mountains environment and honestly could apply as mountains environment as well. But you see that you are basically living on the hill that creates the border or the barrier between these two. So you're right in the middle. That's still a very shores environment. And within any location, shores people also do really well in the liminal spaces of that space. So, it could be that at your house, you really like hanging out on the porch or the patio where it's not that like you're quite at the front lawn or the backyard, but you're not quite inside the house. You're in between. You have access to both of these things. You might like to hang out in hallways. You may even be, one of those people who likes to like stand in the doorway while talking to people at parties or just in general, like you walk up to your, whoever lives with you and you're just hanging out in the doorway. You're like, no, I don't really need to actually enter the room. I'm good here. I'm comfy here. Also, anything that allows you to take this like big picture, long distance view of things or allows you access to different viewpoints so you can see things from different perspectives. That's really great. So physically speaking, that's, things like balconies, big picture windows, places with really nice views, maybe of the horizon, or if you can't be close to the water, you have a view of the water kind of far off and everything in between. You could literally have a great view of a valley. That's something that is really great for shores people. And all of this comes down to the fact that shores environment people are really here for this expansive and multifaceted look on life. So the shores environment is the sixth environment, which is connected to the sixth line, also known as the role model. And the role model is all about that. The sixth line is about the big picture. And in order to see the big picture, you've got to be able to take a step back and see this part and this part and that part. You need to have access to all this different stuff and the ability to expand into new perspectives as well. Now, right now, if you feel like you are stuck in a place and you like can't move and you're like, oh, there's nothing shores about this place, that's actually all right. You can make your space more supportive for you just in the meantime. Because yeah, it is when it comes to environment, it is about the place itself, but then it's also like how you locate yourself within that space and even how you decorate it and how you interact with it. So maybe you move your at-home work desk to be in the hallway between your kitchen and dining room rather than like this alcove, right? That's probably more of like a caves person kind of thing. Maybe you switch up where you sit, whether at your at home workstation or if you go to an office, if possible. Maybe you decorate your space with images that have stunning views of nature or cities or stuff from different walks of life, things that give you different perspectives or remind you to take this higher up perspective. Now, because the sixth line loves perfection, optimism, dreams, fantasy, even like all those things that carry hope and the possibility of things getting better, and Shore's environment is connected to that. Any place that makes you feel those things is going to be fantastic for you and is probably going to be the kind of place where you would thrive most. So, for example, a shores person would really do well at a job in a company whose company culture is about like hope and optimism and growth and forward thinking and experimentation and like failing forward and that kind of thing. They probably would not do well at a place that's like, well, this is what we've always done, so this is what we're going to continue to do. That's not how a shores person sees things. If they don't have that, it would probably crush them. They need an environment that makes them feel like anything is possible and we're moving forward and that the world, or at least their world, is full of potential. So they probably also would not like a job that's like a dead end job. They would just not enjoy that. They need room or the promise of upward mobility and growth. Not because it's like they're trying to climb up to the top and be like, I'm the most successful person, but because that involves expansion. When it comes to the archetype of a shores person, these are the ones who are always looking to expand their horizons, so to speak. So travel tends to be a big thing for shores people, but it doesn't always have to be like actual physical travel. Like they may just like really learning about new cultures or something like that, or different subcultures even. And they also like things that just like take them to a different place. But that doesn't have to be, again, physical travel. That can be a fiction book or a sci-fi movie, video games, anything like that. Like I said, these people tend to love fantasy because the sixth line loves to dream. So overall, these are the people who just love growth, especially into new areas of life. Now, if you have natural shores, unlike someone with artificial shores, it probably will be more important to you to actually live by the water, and it will probably feel so good. Like you probably already know this about yourself because people who love the water like deeply love it. And so you probably would love to live like along the strand of a beach or at a lakefront property or by the river or something. Live in a van down by the river. And if you have the opportunity to do that, I highly recommend that you take it. If you don't have that opportunity right now, please, again, remember you can always make your shore space more supportive to yourself by not necessarily moving from where you are right now, if that's just not a possibility. So just look back on some of the recommendations from earlier in this section. And also remember that since this is an active environment type, you'll know the right shores location for you because you'll feel more able and more motivated to get involved with things there. Now, if you have artificial shores, you are someone who does not need to literally be by the water or a natural shore in order for that environment to be supportive for you. Like you'll just do well living on the edge or the border or liminal space between any two things. So I actually know someone who has artificial shores and she lives in the deserts of Nevada and she's totally okay, right? Because it's supportive to her in other ways. It's unsurprising if, you do tend to feel really good at the waterfront or that is something that you're drawn to, but you'll probably find that's only one kind of place that works for you. Okay. That is it for me. I hope this helped. I feel like I've been talking for like 4 hours. I'm very winded right now. Usually happens with the more in-depth videos. But let me know down below what your environment type is. Tell me if you are observed or observer, if you resonated with this or if this resonated with you. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could leave it a like. It helps get the channel out in front of other people who will like and love this stuff. And if you're interested in human design and manifestation, which are the two things that I talk about on this channel, then I highly recommend you consider subscribing to my channel. I release content on that every week. Also, if you'd like to know more about how to create a supportive environment for yourself, especially in your home based on your environment variable, I highly, highly recommend that you check out the work of Van Ness Henry. I talk about Van Ness every time I talk about variables, but in particular, she really loves talking about environment. And I think she also knows feng shui as well. So she has a lot of really awesome articles on how to organize and decorate and work with your space that you live in already to turn it into an environment that will work for you. So I'm going to link that down below. As always, I also recommend you check out her YouTube channel. But otherwise, that is it for me. As always, you rock, and I will talk to you next time.